Thank you for attending our webinar on franchising as an alternative investment. Some of the topics we'll cover today: why investors choose to buy a franchise and how franchising can protect you from volatile markets, types of franchises that are ideally suited to passive ownership, and most franchises are not, franchises that are recession-resistant or resilient, potential tax advantages up to $1 million through the Section 179 deduction, and how that deduction alone could potentially cover much of your initial investment. And we'll explore alternative franchising options such as master franchise licensing rights that can provide multiple streams of passive revenue. My name is Robert Edwards. I'm the founder of Franchise City. We're a collection of highly experienced entrepreneurs, business owners, and franchise professionals. As consultants, we help investors identify the best franchise options for their specific goals and situation, and I'll post a link to learn more about us on this page. I also host the nation's most watched franchising channel on YouTube, Franchise City Online, and I'll post that social media link at the end of this webinar and invite you to follow us as we post regular content that's related to franchising and business. So statistically, there's no question that franchising as an industry has been highly successful. 1 in every 12 businesses is a franchise. There are 733,000 franchises in the USA. Franchising supports 14 million workers in the U.S. and is directly responsible for over $405 billion in GDP and indirectly for almost $1 trillion in GDP. And franchising is successful for many reasons. The 3 most relevant for the investor is that you are partnering with a known brand name. You can immediately benefit from the brand recognition. You have access to established business operations, systems, and processes. When you invest in a franchise, you have access to these proven business models that, unlike a startup business, have step-by-step operations manuals, a proven client acquisition strategy, and a track record of success that's been tested over many locations and in varying demographics. Passive or semi-passive franchise investment returns also are going to likely exceed stocks or bonds, and I'll end that with the caveat if the appropriate vetting has been done to identify the best franchise for your situation. And I'm going to further clarify that statement by saying there are many poorly performing franchises. In fact, some of the biggest names in franchising have seen closures and gradual declines in their store revenues over the past decade, mostly due to market saturation. If you watch our YouTube channel, you will have seen our analysis on dozens of the major franchise brands, and many of the majors, including Subway, Little Caesars, UPS, GNC, McDonald's, seem to have hit a market saturation point where the system begins to decline. Subway has been closing hundreds of stores, while their average unit volumes have sunk to the lowest levels in decades. Subway, now the second lowest earning franchise on the QSR 50, second only to Baskin-Robbins. And this is the problem with market perception. Most investors make the faulty assumption that the most established brands are the safest bet, when in fact those glory days appear to be behind them. It's very difficult to maintain peak profitability with the extremely low margins the value menus offer, as well as having dozens of competitors, often from your own franchise system, in very close proximity. And this phenomenon is typical in franchising. Early adopters into franchise benefit from obtaining the best territories and master franchise license rights. We'll discuss that in a moment. And decades later, when the brand has become highly visible publicly, the assumption is that these are the best choices from an investment perspective. You can't step in the same river twice. When we look at the data, it's very interesting that these massive brands do not have proportionate failure rates to the smaller brands. And we look at the numbers, there's actually only a 2% variance in the failure rates between startup franchises, emerging brands, and highly established brands. And when you consider the potential upside of a startup and potentially only a 2% increase in risk, it can often make sense to include emerging brands in your research. Here at Franchise City, we regularly identify emerging brand franchises at the right side of the growth curve that have refined and improved their operational processes, built their market niche, and demonstrated strong but controlled growth, yet they still have excellent territories available. Some of these brands have demonstrated 3 times the earnings of an average Subway with an investment that is only moderately higher. We know that franchising is successful. We've seen many investors, even high-profile celebrities, including Shaq, Magic Johnson, Jimmy Buffett, and many others have chosen franchising and have done very well financially. Franchising can provide returns much higher than the general markets provide, and if chosen appropriately, a franchise can provide modest to low investor risk. Beyond celebrities and the wealthy, how can the average investor benefit? And most importantly, as someone who's not a franchise expert, how can we wade through these thousands of available franchise brands to find the best one? Well, our process here at Franchise City helps investors identify, research, and acquire franchises best suited to their unique market demand, operation preferences, budget, exit strategy, risk tolerance, and other criteria. More on that in a moment. Now, the first question we often hear is, what are the returns? Obviously, there is no set answer for that question. Every situation is unique, as there are hundreds of variables, including your risk tolerance, local market demand, and demographic. However, a general range is typically going to fall between 5 to 40% ongoing annual returns, leaning towards the higher end with the right type of business in the ideal demographic. If the owner is able to provide even a minimum level of participation, that can increase returns over a 100% purely passive investment. Now, as you might have guessed, there is no perfect franchise for every situation, and no single franchise that stands out above all others as an obvious winner. The ideal franchise option for one person may be a terrible choice for another, and a franchise that could be wildly successful in Idaho may be a failure in California. Operationally, there are three options available to the investor. The first is 100% passive ownership, where the investor has little to no involvement in the business and has a senior director handling everything. This type of model is best suited to a well-capitalized individual who's financially capable of a seven-figure investment and multi-unit ownership. The margins need to be there to install this high-level director who's going to run the entire operation, so typically this is a minimum of 5 to 10 locations. Next option, and this is the most prevalent, is semi-passive, where the owner has a measure of high-level involvement. That might be operations, strategic planning, high-level decision-making, or even periodic visits to the locations. And these are usually people who have an existing job or a business, and they'll start building their franchise empire while still working at their job. And this can provide the security of not leaving the job while building your empire with the plan to eventually leave the job once a certain revenue level is reached. Now, the third option is semi-absentee or manager-run, where the investor has hired a manager for store-level operations. However, they're still running things directly and visiting the shops regularly. And this can also be someone who wants to keep their job as long as their job has a level of flexibility. Now, the first decision the prospective investor needs to make is how much time they personally have available to allocate on a weekly basis. Certain franchises contractually obligate owner participation. Others are fine with completely passive operation, while others will have suggested minimums based on what they've seen from prior successful franchisees. And we can help identify brands that are suited to your specific goal. Once the decision has been made as to your preferred level of involvement, the next step is to identify franchises that are suited to their operational preference, as well as the investor's background and location. Not every franchise allows for passive ownership, and many franchises don't provide sufficient margins for non-owner operation. Let's take a look at what we have available. So at the top of the list for passive ownership are service-based franchises. And these are franchises that instead of selling a product, like food, for example, provide a service. And why we like services is that unlike food franchises, there is no inventory, no spoilage, no potential for employee theft. Having an actual product to sell adds an additional layer of complexity to the business model. And not that food is a definite no, and depending on your market demand, it could be your best choice. But there are certain benefits provided by service-based franchises. And some examples of these are hair salons, gyms, fitness clubs, child education, senior care, tax preparation, massage and spas, among others. Investors should calibrate the franchise to their long-term goals. For example, certain hair salon franchises like Great Clips, while being a good semi-absentee option, require owners to be able to invest a minimum of 10 hours a week to the business. They also require owners to live within a 25-mile distance from their shops. And this can create issues from the perspective of expansion. So within each franchise model are these nuances that could be problematic if not discovered prior to investing. And your franchise city consultant can help you with that. So of the previously mentioned categories, which of those are the most profitable? Now, as most of you watching are likely aware, great decisions are not made using today's economy as a guide, but by forecasting what might be coming in the future. And we're currently in the longest bull market in history, many red flags in the economy, and some suggest we might be seeing turbulent times in the future. They might already be here, depending on when you are watching this video. Now, once market volatility hits your portfolio, it's likely to suffer if it is not appropriately diversified. Now, franchising, not being a stock that is subject to market volatility, can be a step towards insulating from these economic downturns. Within franchising, there are ways to further insulate your money from recessionary times by investing in sectors that have historically performed well in down economies. Specific vertical markets can actually see business increases during a recession. For example, automotive. When people are not buying new cars, they're fixing their old cars, which is great news for an automotive repair franchise. Value-based hair salons can also see an uptick in business, as can food concepts that have value-driven pricing. Certain societal trends can also guide your decisions. The movement towards healthier eating, health and fitness, sustainable production, and reducing our human footprint are all trends that can be leveraged within the franchise model. Retail-based water filtration opportunities, for example, help eliminate the pervasive plastic bottles problem while providing a healthy alternative to drinking water. Investors have seen 20% plus returns with a completely passive investment in these types of equipment, while also receiving up to $1 million tax benefit through the Section 179 tax deduction. Franchise models that involve certain types of equipment will also qualify for the Section 179, and depending on the investor's tax bracket, can potentially pay for a substantial portion or all of the franchise. If taxes are a primary consideration, certain franchises are better suited to this deduction. Your franchise city consultant can help you understand your options. Another option that might be available to you is master franchising, or area development rights. In this scenario, the investor purchases licensing rights to a city, state, or province, or even an entire country. The agreement will define how many locations are available to develop in the region. The investor can open all the units themselves, or what the majority of master franchisees do is to sell locations within their territory. The master franchise owner then receives a portion of all the franchise fees, as well as ongoing royalties from all franchises in their territory for the life of the agreement. Once the franchises have all been awarded, this can be a relatively passive income stream as you share in all royalties throughout your entire system. It's possible to also operate one or several locations yourself, and some franchises, but not all, require that you do. Master franchising helps the franchisor scale much faster and has been used by many of the larger franchise systems. Rights were, of course, awarded decades ago for the big name brands. However, newer emerging brands have premium master territories available. Ask your franchise city consultant about master franchising if you'd like to learn more. So how does our service work? Our consultants help candidates navigate the complexities of franchise investment. From the almost 4,000 franchise opportunities available, we've shortlisted those that offer passive ownership. Of those, we further refine and identify best fits based on your budget, liquid capital, operational preferences, risk tolerance, time available to work in the business, exit strategy, as well as your demographic, local market demand, and other factors. Once you see some brands you like, we'll conduct the territory checks just to make sure the franchise has availability in your area. If they do, we provide additional data including company history, market position and strengths, and a general overview. If you have continued interest, we'll provide a direct introduction to the franchise, and they'll take you through the discovery process, including sending their franchise disclosure documents and Company Financial. We can also help you or your advisor arrange phone calls with existing franchisees to obtain feedback directly from owners. In addition to being consultants, many of us here are franchise owners ourselves and can help you navigate the process while avoiding potential pitfalls. If you'd like to finance a portion of your investment, we work with the top franchise financing companies. And if you have a 401k, we can help you leverage those funds, often with significant tax benefits. If and when you decide to invest, we're paid a broker referral fee from the franchises, just like a real estate agent or executive recruiter. That allows us to provide our services to you at no charge. You can learn more about our team by clicking the links below. Over the past decade, our consultants have helped hundreds of investors make educated franchising decisions. If you'd like to see what franchise options are available in your territory, please complete the form on this page. Thank you for watching.
Franchise City, a better way to buy franchise.